Hi everyone, this is Adam Fisher, and in this video I'm going to show you how to actually build a storybook animation. It's going to have action scripting built in for all your controls inside the layout. In addition, we will be learning how to actually implement sound, bring in sound, a certain kind of wave file, and how to actually set up buttons to turn your sound on and off and make a really fun playback animation, storybook animation for your portfolio. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to show an example of what one of my prior students did. This is a really great example of storybook animation. If we see, it has music that plays when you open it up. It's got the artist and also who it was written by. So down here in the bottom left corner, you notice I got music. I can hover over these. They change color. I can turn it off, and then at any time, if I want to turn the music back on, I can just simply click the on button, and it gives me all that ability. The start the story control is right here. If I click on this button, it basically starts the whole animation off, and you see it has our character. It comes in. It's kind of indicating what's going on here. You know, this penguin. Basically, it's a story about a penguin who wants a poodle, and he's kind of a silly little penguin. He had a strong wish, and it carries through the whole animation. He wanted a poodle instead of a fish. It's really cute. The person who wrote this, they had a really good written script for rhyming conventions. So we go on to the next page, and you can kind of play through, and it carries forward and shows really what this character was looking for. He went to his mother, asking, please, 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 let me have a poodle instead of a fish. And she said, basically indicating that it's too cold for a poodle here. And but anyway, the penguin goes forward, and he doesn't want to give up. He wants to see if he can explore a little bit and still get his poodle, his character. So he indicates that he would take the poodle for a long walk, and every day he would play with the poodle, teach him how to fetch. This is really neat. Throws a little snowball there. But his mother is saying no, and poodles would not like it in the snow, basically. I click the next page control right here, and it goes forward, and he went and asked his friend the polar bear. So this is a whole nother scene, and you're seeing, like, when you look at this little playback animation that each part of it has a scene, a new character is introduced, and really carries the whole theme of the story, which is great. And the polar bear even says, no, that wouldn't work. So you go to the next page, and what's really neat is I hover over these little play controls. It allows me to go to the next scene here, next page. A little penguin swam to the ocean and asked the wise whale. Of course, the whale approaches and says, there's no poodles for sale here either. And the characters look really, really great. They're well constructed, well created. Will indicates you might have to make another choice here. Yeah, he could sell you a gray seal. How about a manta ray? That's not really what the penguin's looking for. He's looking for his poodle. So he said, "Thanks for those will not do, but thanks for trying." So he swims away, and he's kind of crying. Very upset about the whole situation. Just cannot seem to find a poodle. I go to the next page and cried for a few minutes and kind of dried up his tears. And the music stops here briefly because the track ran out, but I can always go back down to music and turn it back on, giving the viewer, your audience, the option if you want to play it or not. Since he could not get his poodle, he just decided to name his pet fish to Rover. Again, this is a really great animation. The end pops up at the end, and this is pretty much one of the best work I've had submitted to me throughout all my years of teaching. So the real question is, I'm going to turn the music off here. You get the point, but the real question is, how do we make this possible? So in Flash, to make this storybook animation possible, the first thing we need to do is we're going to go to File, and I'm going to go to New. And inside the submenu here, you're noticing that we can select from a variety of templates. The one I'm going to select is the Media Playback, if you click on these little tabs here, you'll see that you can open up templates on the right side of the screen. And I'm going to grab what's called the Title Safe Area HDTV 1080. This is 1080p. It is your widescreen, basically 16 by 9. HDTV, high definition TV, Title Safe Area. And that's pretty much the standard resolution that everyone's using today. So we're going to do the Title Safe Area HDTV 1080. I'm going to click OK. And your stage will come out looking like this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to come over to your toolbar and you're going to click on the Zoom tool, which is also hotkey Z. And then if you hold down on the Alt key on your keyboard, you'll notice that it turns into a little minus icon, and I can left click and just keep clicking on my stage until I'm able to actually zoom out here. And you'll notice that now we can actually see our template and what it actually contains. If I click on the selectional tool up here, or hit hotkey V, and then I hold down on the space bar, it turns into a hand tool and I can pan around on my stage like so. In order to access that pan tool also, you can click on the little hand tool in your toolbar and then just left click and drag. I work better with the selectional tool and then just holding down the space bar in order to change between the both. But this gives you the ability. If you want to zoom into your stage at any time, just left click on the zoom tool or hit the hotkey Z and then just left click. You can zoom back in, hence hold the Alt key down, left click, and you can zoom back out. You can hold the space bar with the zoom tool activated and you can pan around. So this gives you some really nice flexibility to work with and for animation purposes and kind of working around your whole stage. What does all this mean? So we're going to click on the selectional tool and we're just going to look here. The action safe. So let me zoom in. And you're noticing that it says action safe. Okay, action safe basically implies your characters that you build inside the scene. You're going to want to make sure if there are characters that are kind of off the page a little bit, you're still going to want to make sure that what you want to capture of that character is within this box. So they can run outside frame, but this is giving you an indication of whatever this video is sent out to for multiple resolutions. This is just kind of the crop area. The place that's actually indicating that's at risk beyond this point, where if they have a character and you say your character's face was in the scene here. Let's say your character was face head looked like this. Let's get a better looking color here. And if I had this character's face and this was his head, if we wanted to make sure this character was entirely, his head was entirely in frame, we'd want to have the head right here, but not going past the action safe area. If it went past the action safe area, what this is indicating is that if we were to output this video resource to another aspect ratio for displaying purposes, this is at risk of being cropped past that point. Now, if you wanted the character to come kind of slide into frame, he can come past this point, but you wanted to have him look like he's in the foreground, and hence some of this area would have to be kind of cropped off to kind of indicate that. Let's say this is his body. We would actually have him where he extended out past the action safe area, but his body is also outside of frame. So this is indicating that this is the part of that character that's going to be able to be seen due to output of multiple aspect ratio screen resolutions. So if we're basically, what am I talking about here is, this is 16:9. If I was to output this aspect ratio to a different resolution, that still did 16:9, but if you're noticing my aspect ratio is 1920 by 1080, well, the next step down is 1280 by 720 widescreen. What this is actually implying is this action safe area is going to allow that character to still display at that aspect ratio. Turn my stage back to 1920 by 1080, but you can see the scale difference between the 1280 and the 720. Okay, but Flash has the capability of when it exports, it maintains everything that's in frame. It just scales it down to that aspect ratio that I just showed you. Okay, but if it scales it down, it's also understanding that within this action safe, this part of that character is going to be seen, which that's basically what that implies. So that's the breakdown of your action safe window. Make sure that any characters, objects you're animating fall within this outside boundary. Okay? unless they're you want to have them extend off your page, you would have them actually extend outside of frame. Okay, great. For titles, anything that's an animated title typography, you want to make sure it stays within the title safe area. So if I was to create some type here, and let's say this is my storybook animation by, let's see, my name. Whoops, let me get a capital M. There you go. You would want to make sure that anything that is typography, titles, button, controls, is actually going to be within inside this inner box here. So the title safe area, okay? That is what that implies. So we want to make sure anything that's typography, even if it's animated, let's say our animated typography was to come swinging in from outside a frame, we want to make sure it falls within inside this inner box. Okay, so the first step we need to do is actually take a look at the code here that's going to allow us to build this storybook animation. So I have a Word document called Storybook Animation Script, and similar to what we learned prior, as it references the web banner, you open up this Word document and you can take a look here. I have the code below, which we have a stop run command in the beginning. It's got its instance name, which is button 1. We have 2 instance names because we're also setting up a mouse event. And we have a go to and play at this frame, which is frame 100 by default. And we do have a closing bracket. Make sure you do not forget about the bracket when bringing the script over into Flash. This is the code that will be used to build out the whole storybook animation, but certain areas of this code will not be used as we progress throughout the animation and the build out part of the project. Running a stop command must go on keyframe. This stop command here, well, that basically is used to stop each part of the storybook animation of the scene. So let's get started. In Flash, we have what's called our content layer, and we have a title action safe layer. This layer is locked. If you see that I'm turning this on and off here, I can also click the eyeball and it's allowing me to see that I can turn off the title action safe and the title safe at any time. However, you might want to be sure that you're turning this on regularly because you want to make sure that your characters are fitting within that dimension, and also for your titles, which you want to make sure they're fitting within the inner box and dimension. So anyway, I'm just going to turn off right now. And we're noticing we have a content layer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rename content. I'm going to double click it, open it up, click drag. I'm going to name this intro page. And I'm going to just hit enter and lock that in. For my intro page, let's get started with that first. I'm going to actually create a background. This is where I would create background, all my visual content. This is going to be very basic. I'm not going to do anything too elaborate in this video, but it gives you a very good understanding of the build-up process of what you need to do. So for the intro page, I will just go ahead and just create a rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and select a fill color. Let's say I'll just do like a random fill. Remember, you can grab gradients too from your color picker menu. They're down at the very bottom, but I'll just go ahead and do like a light blue background. I'm just going to select the intro page. Make sure that eyeball is turned on. I had it turned off. And I'm just going to basically click and drag and create this rectangle across my whole stage here. And that'll give me a nice background color to choose from. Again, based on what we learned prior in reference to the web banner animation, you're going to want to make sure that you are creating a background because that allows us to add a keyframe and stop command onto that object, okay, being the background shape, which is a rectangle. So going to grab the selection tool here. I'm just going to select my rectangle. Looks like I created with a stroke, so I'll just go ahead and double click this outside stroke and just get rid of that. I don't really need the stroke. And then in drawing object, go back to scene 1 here, get back to standard. I created this object with the object drawing turned on, so if you ever need to get back in there and modify it again, all you got to do is double click on that object. You go into drawing object mode and you can modify and change it as you wish, and then click on scene 1 and you can get back to square one. So I've built this nice background blue on my intro page layer, and I'm going to go ahead and add the amount of frames that I want. So I'm going to click and drag ahead of my intro page layer. So I'm going to start on frame 2. I'm going to click and drag forward all the way to frame 100. Release to select my timeline like we learned prior in reference to web banner animation. Going to right click and go to insert frame. And I'm going to go ahead and build out my my first section of my theme here. Now, I've done 100 frames because as it references my code here, you're noticing I have it where go to and play start at frame 100. Okay, so that's the only reason why I've built it out so far to match up at frame 100. You can have this number be any number you want. I'm just going by hundreds in this video, and as we carry forward, you'll have more of an understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to go back into Flash here. Have it at frame 100. I'm going to go ahead and just select frame 100 and hit a keyframe. I'm just going to go ahead and select frame 100, and now I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to and insert a keyframe. Okay, so we have a keyframe at frame 100, and it looks like I actually created at frame 101 by accident. So if you do that, it's very easy. You just select your keyframe first, just left click it, then click and drag it to move it. I'm going to go back one frame. I'll select that little tail that I don't really need, which is frame 101 by accident, and then I'll just select that one individually, right click and say remove frames, and that'll knock it out. And that way I'm actually on frame 100. Yes, perfect. And I've created that keyframe at frame 100. You're going to notice that you end up doing this by accident as you progress throughout this project. So use that process I just showed you about removing frames, just in case you have too much showing at the very end, or you went a little bit past the area where you meant to stop. So, okay, we're at frame 100. I've added my keyframe. I'm going to go ahead and just go back to frame 1 real quick on this layer, this intro page layer. Again, I can turn on my title action safe at any time, which is right here. So I'll turn that back on. Use that little icon, the eye. And I'm going to go ahead and on frame 1 on the intro page for that keyframe, I'm going to go ahead and create my title. So I'm going to select the text tool, and I'm just going to do, let's see, do white. I'll say, just for this lesson, you probably want to give it a clever title. I'm going to name it, I know, The Train That Could. Okay. Okay. And then I'll enter down and I'll say by my name. All right. So what I've done here is I've created my animation title based on my storyboard or anything that we've kind of put in place as it references the theme of the project, and the artist name. I can double click and get back in there at any time with the text tool activated and just click here, put my cursor at the end, hit enter. I can enter it down to give a little bit more space if I want. I can add more text and based on whatever I want to incorporate. Again, once you get inside your text box, you can just go to your character menu under Properties tab, and you can change the typeface or font, whatever you want, and you got your other specific modifications in here. So click the selectional tool, get back to square one, and I can now just kind of click and move this around wherever I want on stage. If I want to get back in there again, I'm just going to double click, drag, select. I'm just going to boost up my size a little bit. Noticing that it's a little small as it references my 1080 stage here. Let's see, how about 100 for size? That looks pretty good. I'll grab the selection tool, select this, and you're noticing that my by Adam Fisher ran out. So I'm going to basically just double click, select this, get back in there, and then with the selectional tool, I can just kind of hover over that little handle there, the control handle, click, drag, and drag it down. It should bring it back. Perfect. Grab the selectional tool or hit V, lock that in. Looks a lot better, bigger. The Train That Could. So I'm going to do a little, basically like a little animation or just demo project build out here based around that theme title. That'd be good. All right. Okay, so we got that set up, and now we need to actually build our button on the stage. So this is our intro page. We got our title. Perfect. Now I've actually got to create a button, which would be a workable button that allows us to click on and go to the next page or next scene, which would be at frame 100. It's going to start at frame 100. So let's see, back on frame 1 here. Again, I'm moving my playhead back. On frame 1, I'm basically going to go ahead and create a button. So my button can basically be built out any way I wish. I'm going to use a rectangle tool. And when I grab the rectangle tool, I can grab my stroke color if I want, or I can just say I don't want a stroke. In this case, I'm not going to use a stroke. Any kind of fill color I want. Let's say, I don't know, I'll just do like a medium tone gray. That's pretty cool. And with the rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and show you just how to build real quickly an arrow, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to click and drag and create this rectangle shape. Again, I'm creating all this at frame 1. And then using the sub selectional tool, left click that, and then left click on the edge of this shape, brings up control points. I can then just left click and drag, and I can actually just bring these down, and then I can move the other one over that one. Now if you need to turn on your snapping, go to View, Snapping, let's see, Snap to Objects, and that allows me to actually snap my points together. Nice. And I can move my arrow, and perfect. And with that snapping turned on, snap to objects, let's go back to our sub-selectional tool and just left click on the edge to bring up those control points. If you're clicking and dragging with that snapping turned on, you'll notice it snaps to the center of that bounding box. Now the bounding box was accessed again when I created the shape. I had the object drawing turned on. So you're going to make sure you have that turned on in order to access that shape. Gives you some nice flexibility. Okay, I'm going to grab another rectangle. I'm going to use the same fill color, using that kind of neutral gray, and I'm just going to click and drag and create like a little back part of my arrow here. That looks pretty good. And I'll use the selection tool to select it, move it into place. Now again, I can activate the transform tool with that activated. Brings up my transform control box, and I can go to View, and I can go to what's called Guides and Show Guides. Make sure Show Guides is turned on, and also go to View and turn on what's called View Rulers. And I'm going to left click Rulers. Rulers come out. I can click and drag from my ruler area, and it basically creates a guide, and I can make sure that guide runs kind of throughout the middle of that rectangle with the transform tool selected. Perfect. I'll select the other object here with my arrow, and I'm just going to select it and use the arrow keys on my keyboard just to kind of make sure that that guide runs down the center of that control box using the transform tool. Now everything's aligned up accordingly. Really good. Use the selection tool, select it, get back to square one. Looks like I got these looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to View, Guides, and I can just at any time clear guide. So I don't really need that guide there, so I'm just going to knock it out. Alright, with the selection tool activated, I have that part selected, hold shift, I can select the back part, so I can select multiple shapes at one time, and we're actually going to build it into a button now. In order to do so, you go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and within this little Convert to Symbol submenu, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my type is button. I'm going to name this, let's say button. Let's call it button. Okay. Button. Make sure registration point is at the center. Origin. Click OK. And now we have our button. Great. And it's our arrow. Now, if you're noticing in my little animated demo I showed you, the button was able to actually turn colors when you hovered over it. So in this case, what I can do is I can get in there and I can modify my button. Now, what I want to do first is I'm going to go in and I'm going to double click this button. And when I double click it, noticing that inside the button we have an up, over, down, and hit area now that is turned into our timeline. So this button will allow us to actually turn into another color when we roll over it. Okay, and that's exactly what we want to do. Okay, so now at any time I can go ahead and left click scene 1, which is up here to the left, and I can get back to where I was, so I'm now outside that button. Okay, so if I double click it just like a drawing object, I can go inside that button, modify it further, and do whatever I want with it. Having its timeline, this is how this works. So the first thing I like to do is I like to select each frame across the timeline, the up, over, down, and hit. I'm going to explain what that means. I'm going to select over, right click, I'm going to insert keyframe. I'm going to select the down section, right click on it, and hit insert keyframe. And then I'm going to left click on hit, right click, and then insert keyframe. This gives me a keyframe and allows it to go ahead and lock that keyframe in for each section of the button. What does up mean? Up means what it looks like before we even hover over it. The over means what this button looks like when we do hover our cursor over that button. The down is we can have it change into another color or so forth when we actually click this button. And then the hit is an area that the cursor can get near this button that allows us to actually become a selectional icon that we left click to send us to another page. So the first thing I'm going to do is on the up, I'm going to left click up. So I'm actually going to grab the text tool, because what I want to do is I want to have type that's it's kind of ran across this button, this arrow button I've created here. It says go to the next page or go to the next theme, you know, as it corresponds to either your storyboard or written script or whatever you've built as your foundational tool to build from in this project. So I'm going to go ahead and with the text tool selected, I'm going to grab a fill color. Again, I can grab the fill color right here from the properties menu, on the properties tab, and I can just left click drag. I'm going to build out a text box. I'm going to type in go to next page, and I'm going to grab the selection tool when that's created and lock it in, and I can just move it down and have it placed right here over my button arrow in a pretty good area. If I need to get in there to modify the type, the scale, I can just double click, remember, get in there, left click drag, and under the properties tab I can modify the size. Again, I've already set it up to where my size was 55. That worked really nice. With the text tool still activated, you can hover over these control handles, and remember, if you can't see part of what you've typed, that's because you'll have to end up actually moving this handle, and then we'll bring it all into one line. So sometimes when you create it, you might only get one word, even though you're still typing, it's not showing. Don't let that confuse you. Just have the text tool again activated, double click, get in there, and then with that control handle, just left click, drag it, and bring it all out. Okay. I'm going to grab the selection tool, lock that in. Perfect. Exactly where I want it here. Again, you can just have it selected. Use the arrow keys on the keyboard to kind of move it around in place. Perfect. I could go to scene 1 here up in the upper left corner. We're in button. We're working in button again. So I can go to scene 1. I can get back into the actual project itself, and now I can move everything in union. Okay. If I want to get back there to modify the button further, again, I can just double click on it, and then it goes into its button parameters, and I can get in there and then modify it further. So on up, I have go to next page. On over, you're noticing it's not shown at all. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'll just select go to next page, and I'll go to edit, copy, and then I'll select the over, and notice it's disappearing because I don't want it to actually disappear on over. I can go to edit, paste in place. I can go to down and say I want it to look like that when it's down, hit paste in place. And on hit, I'll go ahead and edit and paste in place. And that way on each keyframe, it's displaying the text. Now, if you don't want the text to display in each keyframe, where if I hover over it, let's say you want go to next page to completely disappear, or maybe you want it to change color. So I can, on now over, I can just say, you know what, I want to have that text, and I can hit the delete key on my keyboard. And now when it goes to over, when I hover my cursor over, it will disappear. Let's say you don't want that. Let's say you want actually the text to change color. I just went ahead and did Control Z to get back to where I was, or just go to edit and undo, okay, to get back to where you were with the text. I can double click it, get inside there, click drag, select the text, and I can go to its fill color. Let's say I want it to actually change, I don't know, another color. Let's say I want it to be blue. Grab the selection tool, change to blue. So on up, before we actually even get near this button, it shows that it's got the black text, and when I roll over or hover over it, the text can turn into another color. Go to next page if I want, and then the down. Let's say on down, I just want the let's say I want the text to change to another color. Let's say red, and let's say the button itself. Let's say these two shapes. Let's say I want them to actually change to another color. Let's say I want it to turn into, I don't know, like a green. Oops. If you need to actually select an object that's behind something that is getting in the way in Flash, just select this, right click, arrange, lock, and then you can lock it. That way you can select the object that's behind it, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that part of the arrow and change it to the appropriate color. There we go. And I can just right click on stage, go to arrange, and then say unlock all. and then that allows me to make it selectional again. Okay, perfect. On hit, what that implies is this is the area that your cursor gets close to and allows this object to become a selectional icon. So what I'm going to do is just grab a rectangle. I'm just going to click and drag and go over the entire button, but that is all an area now that allows us to click it. So this way, your viewer, when they want to click on the button itself, they don't actually have to roll over the stem of this arrow and the head. They can actually now be anywhere within this distance from your button, and it becomes a selectional icon. Okay? All right, that is perfectly set up. So let's look through our timeline here. On up, it looks like this, looks normal. On over, I got my text changed into blue. On down, when you actually click it, it turns into a red-green. And on hit, I've got the area that you can select. It doesn't have to be these colors. You can build it any way you want. I've even had students, they don't even like when you hover over the button that it changes color. They like it more where it changes and, just actually looks the same as if it was on up. So on down, they have it change into just the text turns blue. So it's however you want to do it. It doesn't even have to be these colors, but you can, like I say, play with it further and however you want. I'm going to go to scene 1. So I'm going to left click, get back into my scene. And I can go to Control and just go to Test. And I want to test this just to kind of see what's going on here. And if I move my cursor over my button, you'll notice that it changes to the color I want. Perfect. And if I left click, it on the down to trigger it, it's going to turn into my representational colors that I selected and set up. And if I get my cursor this distance, that area, that hit area, notice that it becomes a selectional area to use that button. All right.